Welcome to My Counselor Live. We are so excited to be with y'all today. I'm Tori, and today I am joined with Josh Spurlock. Josh is a clinically certified counselor and a sex therapist. He specializes in marriage counseling, sex therapy, two things I'm sure so many of us find helpful. And Josh, I would love it if we could start just by chatting about what you're up to right now, where you are. I know that you're traveling a lot. If you want to just kind of introduce yourself and share some of that with the people watching.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this new format that we're doing. Those that have been tuning in for a while, will notice a little bit of a shift, things happening a little bit differently. We're experimenting with a new kind of style, and I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be kind of a fun shift.
Yeah, I think it gives you an opportunity as, the counselor to speak into more than just the questions that people are asking, which are awesome. But it gives you an opportunity to talk about some of your articles and just some of what you know. And I think it's going to be really cool. I'm excited to hear feedback from the viewers.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot more guests also, other clinicians on the team. If you've been tracking with folks have been tracking with it for a while, they've seen a whole lot of me. They've seen some of our interim clinical director kind of coming in and doing Q&A with me. But this is new format. It's really going to get a chance to introduce and have more of the team have a chance to be heard from and seen, and their expertise shared with our community.
Yeah, y'all are going to get to see some new faces. It's going to be great. And, everyone on the team, I think, brings something different to the table and adds something else to the body that we have here. I think every person on the team has their own individual personalities and ideas and knowledge that I think is going to be really cool to hear.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. Each one of them are just fantastic clinicians, and they've got different areas of their specialization and interests that they pursue. And so it'll be a real treat for those that tune into the live show to have a chance to hear from those different folks and on a variety of different topics and subjects. Going to be a mix of materials that they have written and talked about, different videos that they've created, as well as just current event type stuff that's happening in the world that would be helpful, and that is helpful to hear from a professional counselor on how to navigate the challenges that are being faced, and topics that are maybe hot topics within culture and whatnot right now, that it's helpful to have a framework that's maybe from a mental health professional and from a Christian perspective, and how to think through some of those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, selfishly, I love getting to talk with all of the clinicians and getting to hear all of the different thoughts and interact with all of them. So I am personally very excited to just be able to pour into it and be poured into by so many people.
They really enjoy it also. All the feedback from the different clinicians on the team has been about how much they have enjoyed sitting with you and talking with you. And I'm sure our audience and community that's going to watch and appreciates how you help tee up their questions in a way that enables them to hear from the different counselors on the team and really receive some feedback, some direction and insight that's meaningful to their life and really relatable. So I just so appreciate you and the work that you're doing.
Yes, thank you, Josh. That's encouraging. I love what I do. I love getting to interact with all of you. I love getting to pour into this community that we have, and I am super excited for this new format. So when we jump in, we are going to start by just talking through what you're up to. So, I want to hear where you're at, what you're doing, what you're reading or anything. Josh, let me know what you're doing.
Yeah, well, as you know, my family and I are itinerant, right? So we live in an Airstream travel trailer, and we travel about the country, visiting the different offices that we have, working on opening new offices, recruiting clinicians. That's a big part of what I do here at the practice.
Always adventuring. I love
I,
it.
I know we're all over the place. We've been trying to beat the heat some right now and being up in the mountains. So we're
Mm.
hanging out near Bozeman, Montana right now, and have been for the last couple of weeks, doing some whitewater rafting on the weekends. And
Oh, no fun at all. Just
I
so
know it's
boring.
terrible. It's
Yeah.
terrible. We have beautiful mountains, sunshine, blue skies, dry air. It's I don't. We're gonna make it though. We're gonna make it. It's gonna be okay.
I love it. That's awesome. So what have you kind of been doing? What have you been seeing as you guys have been traveling this summer?
Yeah, a lot of just kind of taking in Yellowstone and taking in the Grand Tetons, doing some of that road tripping that summertime you might do and go visit some national parks and take in that. Then I had a chance this weekend to help with the process groups that are part of the Townsend Institute out at Concordia University. So Concordia University, Irvine, California, partner with Dr. John Townsend and have a graduate counseling program. And I think they're about to launch a PhD program that is just, I think, probably the best place in the world right now to get graduate training in counseling. And they had their fall launch this past weekend. And so myself and our clinical director, Tish Hedger, were helping out with that and doing some process groups. It was a lot of fun to see just the faces of new therapists kind of stepping into a training program, following the calling that God's put on their life to help them develop as clinicians and the calling that God's placed on their life. It was really encouraging to me. There's such a big need in the body of Christ for folks to step into those really difficult spaces with people and help them through those things. So whenever individuals feel that call from the Lord and then step out in obedience and engage that training process, it warms my heart.
Yeah, such a cool opportunity, and just to be able to interact with so many people who, might be on our team someday.
I know. I was thinking about that as I was sitting with them and kind of hearing their stories and doing process group with them. Just thinking about, I wonder if any of these incoming students will be a part of our team someday. And I hope so. I hope
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. I love, and you touched on this just now. I love just the fact that the Lord is so intentional and calling people to different ministries and jobs that just are so perfect, so made for them. And I know you've experienced this yourself, Josh, and so many people, well, everyone on our team who has just had that calling, felt that gifting, and really taken action in pursuing what the Lord has called them to.
Yeah, the Lord knows the purposes that He's created us for. And whatever our vocational calling is, it has a fitting within His kingdom. And so it feels really good to be living out the purpose that He's created me for, and to be able to do what He's asked me to do and be walking in that. And I know you have that sense as well as you're doing the thing that He's given you to do and using the giftings and talents that He's given you to bless the kingdom.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get to pursue that calling as you're traveling and exploring and adventuring. And I mean, it's just such a sweet, cool life that the Lord has just given you. And I love getting to see it. I love getting to be a part of it and see what you guys are up to. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm super pumped to kind of get into the nitty gritty of our conversation. We are going to touch on some of the articles that you've written. For those of you who don't know, Josh specializes in marriage counseling and sex therapy. And I think that, and Josh, you can speak into this, better than I can, but I really feel like that tends to be lacking in the church, those kinds of conversations from a biblical perspective. Josh, what have you kind of noticed with that?
Totally. For a long time, and by long time, I mean like hundreds of years, right? That there has been a kind of a stigma around sexuality within the church. I think it's a really intentional and strategic attack of the enemy on the church, right?
Absolutely.
That this is such a a vulnerable part of our life, and it's such a basic and fundamental part of our life. Right? Like you go back to Genesis, and God created humans. He made them male and female. Like our gender sexuality, our maleness, our femaleness, and that is a fundamental part of the image of God reflected in humanity. Right? And that he created Adam and Eve, put them in the garden, and told them to go have sex. Right? Like in our text, it comes where go forth and multiply, right? But the mechanics of how he created that to happen is through connecting sexually, right?
Right. And you use that word connecting. I mean, I think of the Hebrew word that's used in Genesis for sex, of connecting and knowing that person.
Yada.
And just the importance of that, and the importance of talking about it, the importance of doing it in the right way and doing it healthily.
Yeah. So, I mean, you got Genesis 1, right? The beginning of the scriptures, the beginning of mankind. You have our male and female gender differences kind of defined, and you have this kind of go and connect and enjoy connecting sexually kind of laid out at the beginning of time and in the scriptures. And so it's just such a core part of our humanity that I think the enemy has really strategically looked to attack it in brutal ways. And we see him attack it in gender inequality and setting up strife between husband and wife. And you see that talked about within Genesis, kind of at the very beginning, kind of that tension and enmity that came from the fall between our gender differences between us. You see it in the abuse and assault that takes place in sexual trauma and abuse, where gals are violated and wounded, and men as well, at young ages. And that has a profound impact on their personhood because it's such a vulnerable and integrated part of who we are. And you see it under attack in the distortion of sexuality with pornography and sexual addiction kind of dynamics. You see it in the attack on our ability to talk about it, right? This idea of their shaming around being a sexual creature, right? That somehow having sexual desire, being a sexual creature is a bad thing, and that we're not allowed to talk about the reality that we're sexual creatures within the church. And that shame and that silence then creates opportunity for the enemy to fill in that silence with his own narrative in a way that's just so destructive to the church, to just people in general, to the body. So it's just real strategic attack at the enemy in all sorts of different ways around our sexuality. And so I really feel a conviction that there's a need for the church for us to stand up and to reclaim that.
Yeah.
To really take back the narrative around sexuality and to speak God's truth into that silence and into that darkness, so that we can see people's lives transformed and healed in this thing that God created in Genesis and said it is very good, can be redeemed as something very good for each individual, each couple, and for our society at large.
Yeah.
And that's our responsibility, I think.
Oh, totally. And I mean, I love the way that you just worded that as taking back. If anyone should be celebrating sex, sexuality, it should be God's people. It should be the people that recognize that this is God's good design.
Yeah, this is his idea. He thought of it, right? We didn't make this up.
Yeah.
This is the good God who created this as a reflection of his heart and for us.
Totally. Yeah.
And I be the ones talking about it.
Yes. And I love your heart for this, Josh, and just, the way that you pursue these conversations and answer the questions, so intentionally. And, you have a series of articles on the website, multiple series, but you have one specifically that I think speaks directly to me as a woman and speaks to a lot of women, called Better Sex for Women. And it's a whole series of articles where you talk through how to experience sex as women with your
Mm-hmm.
spouse in a healthy, the way that God designed it, you know? And I love that series of articles. And I really want to touch specifically on one, which is she wants emotional connection before
Mm-hmm.
sex.
Yeah.
I think any woman who's watching this right now hears me say that and sees themselves in that. Is like, oh yeah,
Yes, that's a fact.
yes, yes. And I mean, it's such a great article, Josh. And I really want to just, talk through it with you, kind of hear your thoughts and get your insight on some of these things. You talk through some of the reasons that emotional connection might be lacking. So I'd love it if we could just start by talking about that, Josh. What are some of those
Yeah.
reasons?
Well, I want to first say that the reason why this series is written out like it is and is really focused on better sex for women is really, I think, female sexuality is under such incredible attack. We talk about
Yes.
how in a general way that sexuality in general is under attack, but
Mm.
man, female sexuality is really uh, under attack within our culture and society.
Right. I
So
mean, I
many.
even think of, in the church. I mean, I think of growing up in that, and of course purity is important, but I think
Mhm.
of growing up in that quote unquote purity culture of,
Mhm.
this shame and this, it's your fault. You have to carry the burden of what men think of you, what you do, what you're, you know what I mean? And I think it's somewhere that I believe that the church has failed in a lot of ways, in teaching young girls how to, see sex in the way that God designed it.
Totally, totally. Couldn't agree more. Definitely true. See that as a counselor and as a sex therapist all the time, kind of the impact that kind of culture and the attitude within the church, how that has hurt women, hurt young gals, especially as they get into marriage and are disillusioned by kind of the things that they had thought would be their experience based on what they were told and just it not being that way. So totally, totally. Whether it be from kind of church cultures context or just kind of male mentalities kind of around sexuality, right? That there can be attitudes and mindsets that men can have that we've picked up from culture, that we've picked up passed down generation to generation, that just view female sexuality in a distorted way and really causes males to be antagonistic towards female sexuality, to not understand and not appreciate the differences between men and women, can paint a picture for women that they're supposed to be like men and how they experience their sexuality, which can create all sorts of confusion and frustration and feelings of rejection and inadequacy for women. So there's just a lot.
Right, absolutely. And I mean, I gotta say, Josh, I really respect you for writing this series and taking the time to really intentionally look at female sexuality and the way that women respond. Because I think that, like we said, I think it's something that is lacking. And I think it's even more lacking when it comes to male authors and men
Mhm.
really taking the time to understand and write these things, for the purpose not just of, speaking to women, but also speaking to their husbands, like, what does my wife need?
Totally. And I think that's a really important piece that as much as these articles are written to women, kind of understanding your own sexuality in a way that helps you own that and be able to enjoy that to its fullest as God's designed for you to. It's as much for educating men as well and helping them be able to understand the women in their life and understand their wives in a way that helps them provide a nurturing and healthy context for their female sexuality to bloom in and to really be and enjoy that fullness that God has designed for them. Because men play a big role in that, and creating that space. Sex is a very relational thing. It's not something that a woman can just bloom in, without it being a relational thing with their spouse.
Mm, yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think this article is a good place to start, of
Yeah.
that emotional connection that is just vital to healthy, safe sex for women, you know, emotionally safe sex, you know.
Totally.
I just think that it's so important. And I would love if we could start just by talking through the reasons why that emotional connection can be lacking, I think, in marriage. And I mean, I've experienced this in my own marriage. Sometimes it's like you get married and these, you know, rose-colored glasses, everything's going to be fine. Our emotional connection is never going to fade. You know, these vows
Right.
that we sang on our wedding day are going to be something that we're constantly holding to, and everything's always
Easy and
good.
easy.
Yeah, easy. But you know, why does that happen? Why can that emotional connection just sort of shift and change with seasons and different
Yeah.
things? I'd love if you could just touch on that as, you know, a therapist.
Yeah, I want to talk to it as a sex therapist, talk to it as a man, and as an expert on the subject matter, but not as someone who's perfect on the subject matter. Like sometimes we can watch listen to a podcast or watch a video or read a book, and the authors can kind of seem like they're on a pedestal of sorts, that somehow they've got it all figured out and kind of do this perfectly, and that's why they're writing on the subject matter. And that's just not reality. That's not true. The authors of scriptures weren't perfect people, and that they were flawed individuals that God used in order to communicate his truth to the body at large. Authors throughout the centuries and leaders within the church are all flawed individuals. I'm a flawed individual, and I'm not the perfect husband by any means. And I don't navigate all these things perfectly. Much of what is written and talked about is from pain of my own experience and struggles that Cassie and I have had, and things that I've had to learn and unlearn from my experiences and growing up and in culture and whatnot. And so if you're a man out there and you're watching this, or if you're a woman out there, right? If you're a woman out there thinking there are these men out there somewhere that have this all figured out, and you just happen to marry one that's kind of not got it all figured out, listen, this is not true. We're all out there kind of struggling, trying to figure this stuff out. And if you're a husband out there and you're like, you know what, I'm so far from like hitting this, or I feel so lost in how to navigate it, it's pretty hopeless for me. And so there's no even point in even trying to understand my wife and her experience, because it's like a totally different language than I know. Listen, we're all in that same boat. We're all having to learn. None of us come from the womb kind of being like Don Juan and knowing how to navigate these things well. Some of us have the advantage of having maybe dads in our life that did a better job than others and of modeling some of these healthy things. And so they have a leg up in internalizing some of that. But most of us, like myself, didn't have that, and really have had to struggle and work hard and continue to have to overcome my own selfishness and shortcomings and brokenness in order to show up well in my relationship and marriage. So just want to put that out there so that
Yeah, we're never going to have it all together. We're never going to. I mean, you know, we're going to try and we're going to pursue each other in the best way that we can. But, you know, we're always being sanctified. We're always growing. We're always learning. You know, I remember I've had conversations with grandparents, you know, and talking with them about their marriage and things that they've learned and things that they're still learning.
Yeah, totally. So let's talk about the bait and switch, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times guys especially can have the sense of a bait and switch kind of deal, right? And they're like, oh, it seemed like my wife, when we were dating, was interested in being physically close, was turned on, was excited about connecting, kind of maybe every time we were around each other, right? That had that sense of we had to really work to keep our hands off of each other in a piece, right? That kind of tension that was there, and we just couldn't wait to be married and be naked and rolling around to each other. And so I maybe had this vision in my mind that married life was going to be like all the sex I could possibly want to engage all the time, and it was going to be easy because it just seemed to be an ever-present sort of thing on both of our minds whenever we were together before we got married, right?
Right. I remember thinking that when my husband and I were just dating, you know, there was just
Totally.
this constant struggle, this constant
Mhm.
excitement, and you know, then it was like all of a sudden it was like, oh, I don't feel like I need to be touching you 24/7.
Yeah, right. Total like, huh, this is different.
Almost this
Which,
confusion, like, wait, I didn't think that this was going to be like this.
yeah, what happened to me? And husbands can be like, what happened to you? Like, this is different than what was expected. So that's, man, it's such a common, normal, universal kind of experience. And when I say universal, that doesn't mean that there aren't exceptions to the rule. There's certainly couples that have a different experience around that, either before they get married or after. And we work with that all the time. So when I say universal, we're talking 80% of the time, right? So it still leaves like 20% of the time that people experience is different, which means 20 couples out of 100, their experience is different than that. That's a lot of couples
Yeah.
out there. And so if you fall into that 20% out of 100, that some of the what I'm talking about was like, that wasn't our experience. Listen, there's lots of people that have had your same experience, and we can navigate that as well. But we're talking right now about those that are kind of in that 80% out of 100, and that's a really common disillusionment for you to have when you get married. And it has to do a lot with the way our bodies change chemically, right? All this is neurobiology, right? God wired us in such fantastic and intricate and complex ways. But when you and your husband were dating, right, and you guys were engaged, the primary hormones that played a role in the sexual tension that you guys felt, kind of that longing for each other, you know, wanting to be together, looking forward to being together, was dopamine and adrenaline, right? So adrenaline and dopamine are kind of what get us like really excited about kind of new things, right? We get jazzed about something to come, you know, and in the newness and new relationships, dopamine and adrenaline really supercharge the sexual tension hormones that we experience in our body. It's like nitrous oxide, gasoline thrown on a fire, right? It really intensifies that experience. When we get married and relationships normalize, right? So we kind of settle down to a relationship, the hormones that drive kind of sexual relationship shift from dopamine and adrenaline to oxytocin. So oxytocin is a bonding hormone, right? Have you ever heard of Pitocin? You know any
Yes,
gals that
that's
have,
what that isn't that what they do to like induce labor?
yes,
Okay,
yes, you're
okay. I've never
exactly
had
right.
kids, but I feel like I've heard friends talk about this.
Totally right. Yeah. So if you've been around babies, been around pregnant women, labor and delivery, you've probably heard Pitocin. Pitocin is the synthetic form of oxytocin. So it's
Okay.
laboratory engineered synthetic oxytocin that our body creates naturally,
Okay. And
right?
oxytocin, you said, is the bonding.
Right,
Okay.
exactly that. It's a bonding hormone, right? And so it's the pregnant woman's body in labor and delivery is flooded with oxytocin, and they intensified even more with synthetic oxytocin, pitocin, if there's having difficulty with labor and delivery, right? And we really think that that warm, fuzzy feeling that you have when your child is born and comes out, you're like, oh, after all this pain that you've just been in and all of this struggle and the discomfort, instead of wanting to kill that thing when it comes popping out of you for all the pain that it just caused you, there's this euphoria of kind of warmth and connection and just, oh, I just want to snuggle and hold and engage. It's all that oxytocin that's in the blood, right? That feels that bonding and connecting between mother and child kind of in that moment, right? So oxytocin plays a huge role in established relationships, right? In the sexual relationship. So for men experience this massive oxytocin release in their bodies when they orgasm with their spouse, right? So when you connect closely with your husband, you guys enjoy connecting sexually with each other, he orgasms, and that in his body, there's this flood of oxytocin that leaves him feeling very close to you and connected with you. And there's this emotional attachment that got wired into his body for him to experience a bonding moment kind of with you through that sexual connection. And women experience that as well, but the release in men's body is about 400% greater. It's like 4 times the release that women have in that same experience.
Yeah, well, and I was even thinking, I mean, it can often, a lot of times, like, women aren't orgasming every time. So that's another side of it that's like, well, are you still having that same reaction as him if you don't orgasm,
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. Orgasm isn't the only thing that causes oxytocin release. In fact, things for a woman, non-sexual physical touch, eye contact, right? When you gaze longingly, your husband gaze longingly into your eyes and is talking to you, kissing, snuggling, and that creates all sorts of oxytocin release within your body.
What that is.
Yeah, in fact, when he's attentive and listening to you, you're sharing your heart, you're sharing your day, you're sharing things that are meaningful to you, and that there's oxytocin that releases.
That's so
body.
beautiful.
Yeah. When he is doing an active service of some sort, around the house or whatnot.
Oh, when my husband does the dishes, let me tell you, there it is.
You can feel the oxytocin, right? You can feel that.
Yes.
And this is such a really, really important distinction and understanding between men and women is that men experience this huge oxytocin release at the end of the sexual experience together, right? Where they're orgasming with their spouse. For women, for them to get in the mood, that oxytocin injection, that oxytocin experience that happens from the relational connectedness and these other kinds of non-directly sexually or erotic kinds of interactions causes oxytocin in the body that then primes that sexual desire and the desire for more sexual intimate connection. That's normal for women's bodies, which is why this emotional connection piece, right, this article that we're talking about is such a key player in this, that for a woman to have that oxytocin experience that then kind of primes the body for wanting to connect sexually requires these kind of emotionally connective experiences for her by God's design, right? So it's interesting. Think about the mechanics here, right? That, if you back up and look at God's design within this, a man, has this bonding experience at the end of a sexual experience. Woman requires that emotional connectedness and that oxytocin experience at the beginning of the experience. And so for a man to be able to get to what his body is longing for at the end requires that he engage in a way that's outside of his normal structure and to serve his wife in ways that are not natural for him, but are what prime that experience for her. And so there's this kind of design that God has put into place here that says for you to get here, you've got to get out of yourself and engage in ways that are not natural for you in serving your spouse in order to cultivate that in your wife.
Oh, God is so sneaky and so smart.
Isn't that brilliant?
It is. It's brilliant. And, it all goes back to, the marriage relationship being just kind of a prime example of, our relationship with the Lord and all of those things, just the way that, like you said, that the husband has to kind of get out of his bubble and serve his wife and love his wife, in order to get to that place. And not like it's like a, I'm only serving you so that I can get to this, but like a genuine desire to love his wife and that kind of fulfilling the needs that both of them have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. So, sometimes husbands can be confused a little bit, right? Because they can be like, I do that, or I have done that. I did that one time and it didn't work for me. You know, is sometimes the conversation that I can have with friends, like, I tried that once, it didn't work. And that, and I'm like, okay.
One time.
One time, right? I tried that once, it didn't work. I just totally gave up on it after that. Or I was like, oh, okay. So let me say that one, we're talking about a setting a context kind of for this in our relationship, right? And it's not a guarantee that this is gonna like make everything magical and perfect. Think about it maybe like the gasoline in your car, right? There are other reasons why a car might not start, or other reasons why a car might break down other than running out of gas, right? And so it's not the only thing that can go wrong. It's not the only thing that could be getting in the way for you guys going. But without gas, the car ain't gonna run, right? Like everything else can be great, no gas in the car, it ain't gonna run. And so you might start with going, is there fuel in the tank? Right? And start there. Because sometimes it's as simple as that. Sometimes the difficulties that a couple are having is there's just not gas in the tank. And it's not that there's something major broken under the hood. It's not that there's, you know, some huge mechanical issue with the vehicle. It's just run out of gas and we got to put gas in the tank. And if we'll do that, yeah, maybe it won't start on the first time you go to turn over as the fuel's getting back up into the engine and up through the pump, it's primed, but that'll do the trick if we'll fill the tank up on it. If we fill the tank up and it's still not turning over, maybe there's something else. We got to troubleshoot it further. But man, it's a necessary starting place to see, are we filling the tank to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'd love to just talk through as we, you know, kind of continue this segment about this awesome article that you've written, just how to kind of fill that tank. You know, you mentioned several tips throughout the article, ways that husbands can pour into their wives, ways to kind of troubleshoot those problems. You know, you mentioned being friends and making out in the kitchen and some of these different things. And I'd love it if you could just expand on some of those tips.
No, I want you to expand on them.
You want me to expand?
I do. Here's the game we're going to play, right? So this is a modeling, right, of what it is I want husbands to do, engage. This is kind of the tip, right? I'm going to ask you, what are the things that feel like it puts that fuel in your tank, in your marriage, you know, the experience that you have in that, and then I'm going to listen, right? I'm going to ask you a question about your experience of life and then listen and take that in. And this is kind of the starting place. You know, if you're a husband out there and you're going, well, what are the tips? Give me the tips here. I'll make my bullet point list. You tell me what to do. I'll go to do it. You have this woman that you're in a relationship with, right? And she knows her own experience and what those things are for her. You don't so much need me to tell you and of what it is that will put that fuel in your spouse's tank, as much as you need to ask the question of her, create the space, be genuinely interested in what her experience of life is, invite her to share with you what those things are that really put the fuel in the tank for her, and take those things in, listen to that. So we're going to practice that in that, right? Tori, I would love to know from you, as you know your own experience, then, what are the things that are really good for you? What are the things that help put that fuel in your tank in your relationship?
Yeah, you know, I think, and I mean, you touch on some of these ideas, but I think, you know, when my husband is intentional about loving me, that just speaks volumes beyond him saying the right things or doing the right things. It's just the intentionality of, I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to do the dishes without you even asking me. And, you know, sometimes I hear this joke. I've heard it a few times, this like chore play. And I think it's so funny. But honestly, sometimes, at least for me, in my own experience, it's very accurate, just in the sense of like, when my husband, you know, is serving me intentionally and genuinely, I mean, that definitely increases those oxytocin levels for sure. And I think that is just really important. And I think beyond that, just like being a friend, really just listening and sitting with me and, asking me about my day, but with a genuine desire to know about my day and hear. And I think that all of those things all kind of work together to kind of create that emotional safety and emotional connection for me. I think for me personally, as a woman and in my relationship, safety is really key for me. To feel emotionally safe and seen by him changes the
What does
game.
that what does that mean? What does that look like? So for you, to feel safe emotionally and within a relationship, what are the kinds of things that your husband does that helps you feel emotionally safe with him?
Yeah, I'm getting blushy just thinking about him because I love him so much. But I think just when he really thinks of me, when he says, "I saw this today and it reminded me of you," I think feeling known is very important for me when it comes to feeling safe. And I touched on this earlier. The Hebrew word that God uses in Genesis to describe sex is yada, which means to be known.
Right.
And I think that is just so key for me in feeling safe,
Mhm.
is knowing that this man who wants to be with me in that way knows me beyond just my body. He knows me beyond what he's getting out of this. He knows my heart and my soul and the things that I'm passionate about, the things that excite me, the things that hurt me. And he's intentional about being mindful of all of that. I think is just really important. It's not hard. I just think like a
Oh,
lot.
that's easy for you to say, Tori, and it's not hard. For men, it's actually, for most of us, some of it's more natural and easy. Some of us, again, grew up with dads that were great at this and modeled it, and so we internalized it, and it's first nature for us. But man, for a lot of us, the things that you're describing feel like a foreign country, like you're
Yeah,
describing an alien world. It
yeah, I'm
feels
starting to
like,
want to encourage the men watching this that like all she wants is to feel safe with you. you
yeah.
know she wants to feel known by you. She wants to feel loved by you. And
Mhm.
every woman is a little bit different. I mean, the things that make me feel
Totally.
loved might not make your wife feel loved, but
Right. Which is why this what we're doing right here is so important, right? Is you're not laying it out there necessarily for every woman that's out there, but what you're doing is you're modeling kind of what happens when you're able to be asked and listened to, right? That every woman's heart wants to be known, and she wants the things that are her and the things that make her her and the things that do it for her and drive that feeling of being loved and feeling close and accepted and feeling safe. Wants her husband to know those things about her. It's not unless she's been shut down a whole lot, right, and doesn't trust you, when you ask. And most women don't require a whole lot of like teeth pulling in order to share the things that are really meaningful to them. If they've been really hurt, and there's mistrust in the relationship because the things that have happened, breaches in the relationship, so they don't really believe you're genuine when you ask, and they might be real hesitant to be vulnerable in that way and share those things for fear that it might lead further hurt. But assuming you have, a level of safety within your relationship, if you ask, you're probably going to get a response, an honest response about how they experience life and what they really enjoy with you and what they would love more of with you and what really does it for them in terms of them feeling close and connected. And that safety piece, like you're talking about, that being known, part of that's about me really caring about, or your husband really caring about your experience of life.
mm,
Right? That I treat those things, and he would treat those things as sacred and as precious, that he would want to hear that and not want to say or do things that would be hurtful to your heart, or uh, ignore, neglect, or blow those things off. That knowing that your heart matters to him and that he wants to hold that in high honor and protect that. That's, you tell me, does that, is that part of what makes it feel safe for you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just to feel treasured, I think is the word that I
Mm,
would
yeah,
use, treasured.
that's a powerful word. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, just in closing about this emotional connection piece,
Mhm.
what would be your word of advice to the husband who's watching this and is wondering what to do?
Totally. Do what Tori and I just did. Only, not with Tori, with your wife in that, right? Go and invite an honest conversation around it,
Mm.
right? Just the mere fact, right? Let's go this way. We'll check it because we've got a woman here, and it's very helpful to have a woman in part of this dialogue conversation. You don't have to take my word for it as a man in this. Uh, you, Tori, your husband comes to you and says, "Hey, can we talk?" Then I really want to understand how you experience me and what are the things that happen in our relationship that really help you feel close to me and connected with me and safe with me and really are encouraging to that for you. How do you feel about him asking that question?
I would probably respond with, I've been thinking about this lately.
Right? There's totally this piece of feeling valued and cherished and treasured just because he's wanting to have the conversation.
Totally. And as women, we have so many thoughts flowing in and out and little things that happen that make us think of something else. I mean, there's so many things that sometimes like it really is like, oh, I've thought about this recently and I kind of wanted you to ask me this.
Yeah, exactly. And so, just by initiating that conversation, kind of leading the way, and saying, hey, you matter to me, our relationship matters to me, I want to understand this better, I want to be on the same page with you, and kind of creating that opportunity and that safety and that space for having the conversation is huge. And it's not a one and done kind of conversation, but it's one of kind of earnestly having the heart of wanting to grow and knowing your wife, and to hear those things and to take those in and not try to change her, try to argue why those things shouldn't matter to her or why those things don't matter, but to accept her and what she's sharing with you and to value those things. That'll be huge for every man out there. I mean, this is huge for me, and it's something that's struggle for me to do. Easy for me to kind of lose sight of that and have to need to circle back and make that space and go, how are you experiencing us? How is this for you with my wife? So that's what I would pitch out there, Tori.
Yeah, awesome. And I mean, I think even just to women, I think there's importance in initiating that conversation when you feel
Mm-hmm.
like you need to have it and really
Mm-hmm.
sharing your heart and being vulnerable in that place. To love is to be vulnerable. It's to be real and raw.
Totally.
And when I'm struggling with something, when I'm feeling a certain way, it's huge to be able to go and communicate that to him, and really
Totally.
kind of be in it together, seeking that restoration, that emotional connection together.
Yeah, I totally want to encourage that and just affirm that, Tori. I think you're absolutely right. That there's a need for wives, for you on your side of it to take responsibility for that in your relationship also, and to find your own voice and have your own voice in that, and to rather than expecting him to just know that that conversation needs to happen or that you're feeling a disconnect from him, for you to be able to own that and be able to bring that to him and go, hey, I really need to talk with you about this. I'm feeling disconnected from you. And rather than it being an attack, that's like, you're really sucking as a husband. We need to talk about this. Uh, Instead for it to be like, hey, I really care about the connection between us. And I really want to be close with you. And I feel a disconnect. And I want to talk about what's happening for me that maybe is a part of that. And to really set it up for success in that way. So appreciate that, Tori.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, this has been great. I have loved talking about this article. Guys, if you're watching this and you heard some of what we have to say, there's a lot more unpacked in both this article and his whole series on better sex for women. So seriously recommend you go and give that a listen. In the description, we'll have that link in there for you to go listen to this. To go and read this. But it is just so helpful, such a game changer to be able to recognize this thing both in yourself and in your spouse.
Totally.
You know,
Huge for couples.
Absolutely. Yes. So the next topic I just kind of want to jump into, as part of this new format, we'll be talking through some of the trending topics, maybe current events going on in the world right now.
Mhm.
And one of the trending topics, as we've just been researching and trying to figure out what we want to talk about, has actually been the issue of gaslighting. I've realized that a lot of people have a lot of questions about this. I think
Mhm.
recently in culture, maybe in the past couple of years, it's become more apparent how often this happens. I don't think I had actually heard that word probably until about a year or two ago.
Mhm.
Now, a lot of people use that word, sometimes in an appropriate situation and sometimes
Mhm.
not. So, Josh, I just want to talk through this. I would love to hear your thoughts as a counselor on gaslighting. First of all, what is gaslighting? Can you just give us a general definition?
Yeah. So gaslighting is crazy making. And yeah, it's where it's a manipulative kind of technique or dynamic whereby I try to convince you that your perception of reality isn't valid, isn't legitimate, right? That what you saw, you didn't see, what you heard, you didn't hear, what you felt isn't the reality of the situation. That I look to try to convince you that your perception of reality isn't valid. Right? It's kind of the foundation of it, right? That's what gaslighting is. It's a reference to an old a scene in an old movie where the lights in the house would kind of dim, that the man in the scene, had a system in place that would dim the lights, and the woman would go, "What is going on?" And he'd pretend like everything was fine and that nothing had happened to make her believe that she was losing her mind and going crazy, right? So that's kind of what's the historical for the term gaslighting, but it's used to capture anytime a person is trying to distort someone's reality in a way to cause them to not be able to trust or not trust their own judgment or experiencing of things in life. And so it's a red flag of kind of manipulation, really.
Yeah, absolutely. My question would be, is this always intentional? Can people gaslight without even realizing that they're gaslighting someone?
Well, yeah, no, yeah, blah. Yes, it's always intentional, kind of by definition. That gaslighting is when somebody is trying to manipulate, right? So if they're gaslighting, they're calling into question. They may not use that term, knowledge, but it's a manipulative technique. It's something that's being done with the intent of trying to make the other person not to trust their own judgment, right? That I have an ulterior motive,
Mm.
and that I'm lying and I don't want you to think I'm lying. And so when you come to me and say, "Hey, this doesn't seem true," and I go, "What are you talking about? Of course it's true." And I try to, lay out all the different things that would not only convince you that it's true, but make you feel crazy for thinking that it's not true. And and that I want you to feel crazy for not thinking that it's true, so that you'll believe me and you'll not question whether or not I'm telling the truth in the situation. And that if I if I'm really earnest and I'm adamant about my story, then it'll cause you to go, "Well, did I really see what I saw? You know, is this really what happened? Which is the intended end result of gaslighting, is to cause you to question your own judgment and perceptions.
Yeah, well, I think even, questioning your own judgment and perception, but also kind of questioning your own identity. Like, in
Identity, your sanity. Totally. Are you crazy? Exactly. It's crazy making.
yeah.
Yeah, like what is going on? Yeah, so definitely super manipulative kind of thing that happens. Doesn't it happens in romantic relationships, but it happens in other kinds of relationships also. And you know, I think the one of the natural questions is, what do you do about it, right?
Right.
And then, so how do I know if this is happening in my world? And you've got to challenge that with reality. And you need somebody outside of your own head in order to help you calibrate to reality. And so these things, people who gaslight typically look to try to isolate the person that they're looking to gaslight with also, right? Because if there's another person in the room and the lights dim, and you're going, did the lights just dim?
Yeah.
And the gaslighting person is going, I don't know what you're talking about. Everything's just the way that it was. I could have swore it was brighter in here and the lights just dimmed. If there's somebody else in there, yeah, the lights just dimmed. You're not crazy. The lights are dimmer. That kind of like
Like
calls out the
power.
gaslighter, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Removes the power from the person gaslighting.
Exactly, exactly. So if I'm the gaslighter, I don't want anybody else in the room. I don't want anybody else to observe what's going on, because it kind of ruins my whole manipulation, right? It kind of ruins my ability to control and manipulate the situation if there's somebody else, observing reality, who can speak the truth about reality in the situation. And so the two really go together, kind of the gaslighting and the isolation of the person who's trying to be gaslit, as it were, if that's the right term, and that, right?
So I think that's the word I would use.
Yeah, so you want to notice, is in this relationship, has there been a tendency to try to cut off and discourage relationship with the people who care about me in my life, right? To put distance between me and maybe my family, distance between me and my close friends, distance between me and my small group at church, or trying to keep me from having or sharing, because sometimes the distance there is about not sharing, right? And so for various reasons, we said, that these things are private. I don't talk about what's going on in your life, with other people. Why would you share what's going on between us outside? I feel so violated by you, breaking the confidence of our relationship, that sort of thing, which, all sounds good, logical, which is why it's crazy making them. But what it does is it isolates you from allowing the people who are in your life from actually seeing what's happening in your life in a way that allows that gaslighting to take place. So you really have to, one, notice the isolating that's taking place and choose not to participate in that. Be like, no, no, healthy couples, healthy people have other intimate relationships, people who know what's really going on with them and their world, and allow others to speak into their life and be a part of the community of their life, and to be able to talk with others about what's happening. And oftentimes they'll find, going, what? That's crazy,
Right.
which can be tough. Sometimes we get to a certain point and we isolate because of shame, right? We're being shamed by the gaslighter for wanting to share, wanting to connect, but then we can feel like, if I share this, people are going to think I'm crazy. They're going to think I'm crazy for going along with or staying in this so long, and that shame can be isolating. And all the shame just kind of keeps us stuck, which is right where the enemy wants us to be.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but would we kind of classify gaslighting as a form of emotional abuse?
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's like a common thing that emotionally abusive people use. You know, it's in the toolbox. There's an emotional abuse toolbox, and that emotional abusers carry around gaslighting as kind of one
Yeah,
of the go-to tools in an emotional abuse toolbox.
totally.
Totally.
Well, it's such a, I don't want to say easy, but it is a very good way to manipulate someone and
Mm-hmm.
make them think that they are crazy, make them
Mm-hmm.
kind of the starting point of even just, physical abuse and things like that, because then it's like,
Totally.
anything that you do with me, anything you do to me, I'm going to view as not real or not important, or I'm crazy.
Yeah, and it's a frog in the water, boiling water kind of scenario, right?
Yeah.
Like typically gaslighting isn't like really blatant and in your face when it starts coming into a relationship. Typically is really small and kind of incremental, and the isolation is small and incremental. But it gets to a place where it's just like nutso. But you've been in it so long, it's kind of feels normal at that juncture. Like you again are questioning your own reality. Like, is this just normal? Is it me? It must be me, because it's, been boiled alive kind of by the incremental shift in it.
Right. No, absolutely. I love hearing you just speak into that, Josh. I know that that's something I think a lot of people have struggled with. I believe that, I have experienced that in my own life. And sometimes we don't even realize it. I think sometimes, especially
Almost always, right?
almost always, yeah. And I
It
think,
would be really weird. It's uncommon for folks to immediately notice kind of gaslighting taking place, because it only works in the context of an established relationship, right?
that's
If
exactly
somebody you don't know and you don't trust tries to
right.
gaslight, you're like, what are you talking about? Get
Right.
out of here.
That's
I'm
exactly what I
better.
was going to say. When you're, in a close relationship, a romantic relationship, someone
Mm-hmm.
that you value, someone who you feel is supposed to value you, for example, a parent or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, it's very difficult, I think, to remove yourself from the situation and see it as it is.
Mhm. Yeah, because the closeness of the relationship, the intimacy in the relationship is the leverage for kind of making you think you're crazy,
Yeah.
right? And so if there's that leverage isn't there, then you're not going to trust somebody else's judgment over yours. Not, but when you bring in the relationship piece of it, we're like, well, maybe I'm maybe I'm not seeing this right, right? And begins to screw with your head.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that is really helpful just in helping us understand what that looks like and how to get help. Really, I think you touched on this. Not being isolated, I think is a very key
Mm-hmm.
part of getting out of situations like that, of
Totally.
recognizing and seeing the truth. So I appreciate that, and I hope that someone watching needed to hear this. I really do. The trending topics that we talk about, are thought of and prayed over, and hopefully that was able to really speak into someone's life who's
Mm-hmm.
watching this, and that you are seen and known and you're not crazy. And if you feel like this is happening to you, reach out to a friend, reach out to a counselor or someone you can talk to openly and honestly about this, because it's emotional abuse, and it
Mm-hmm.
does hurt, and it is a valid feeling to have when you feel afraid or shamed into believing something like that.
Yeah, counselors can be really helpful if you think you're in a relationship where there's gaslighting going on, and which is typically why the person gaslighting doesn't want you to see a counselor and doesn't want a counselor in your life or situation. Almost always, there's one of two things will happen. Either the counselor will, or the person will adamantly not want you to see a counselor engage, or they will want to kind of pick a counselor or go see the counselor first because they want to see if they can convince the counselor of their version of reality in a way, and then the counselor can be a ally to them in manipulating the situation. We see that oftentimes as therapists, where spouses will come in and a spouse kind of wants to convince the therapist of their version of reality so that the therapist can then be another leverage tool for them to manipulate their spouse with. But we're trained therapists. I mean, there are not so good therapists out there that can get caught up in that. But generally speaking, therapists are trained to catch that and see that, and they can see through the manipulation and what's going on in the situation. And therapist doesn't have a dog in the hunt, right? They're not your parent or mother. They don't have some vested interests of telling you what you want to hear. And they're just there observing reality as it sits in front of them and sharing what they're seeing, what they're experiencing in the situation. So it can be a really helpful way to have somebody who's familiar with all sorts of manipulation tactics and doesn't have a dog in the hunt and can look at the situation and kind of share the reality that they're seeing, which can be really helpful for beginning to break out of some of that manipulation that you might be caught up in.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Super helpful. Guys, if you think of any questions kind of around this topic, feel free to message us, inbox us, comment them. We are always here, to sit with one of our licensed counselors and answer those questions and really just pour into you with wisdom that you may be needing in situations like that. But for the last portion of our episode today, we're going to just talk through a few questions that have been sent into us in the last week or so. Guys,
ask the counselor.
Yes, ask the counselor. Guys, we just love answering your questions, and you are just always welcome to DM us, to comment on anything, and you can also submit questions from our website at MyCounselor.Online/ask. You are always welcome to submit your questions, and we are here to answer them every week at MyCounselorLIVE. So, Josh, I just want to jump in. You did a sex therapy themed Q&A with Tish a couple weeks ago. And
yes, and if people didn't catch that, Tish was a rock star. We had some really great questions.
Yeah.
And so that's worth going back and checking the replay of.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tish is awesome. She's actually going to be in a future My Counselor Live video with me in the next couple weeks. So keep an eye out for that. But Tish is great. If you guys missed it, feel free to go watch the replay. It's on our YouTube, on our Facebook. But guys, we are just going to talk through a few of those questions that are kind of left over from that Q&A around sex therapy, as Josh is a just professional, really experienced sex therapist and someone just really knowledgeable, really wise.
These are I think some of these are ones that maybe we didn't get to in the last one because we ran out of time. And some of these are ones that have come in since then, right?
Exactly. Yeah. We've got a nice list of, different sex therapy questions that are kind of constantly being asked. A lot of what you do, Josh, is around sex therapy and marriage counseling. And so I think this is just a great group of questions to talk with you about.
Awesome. Let's hit it.
All right, let's dive in. So this first question came to us this past week.
I'm rolling my sleeves up. Let's see, I got my sleeves.
Got it. Just get ready.
I'm ready to dive in.
I love it. Awesome. Well, this question came to us this past week. This person said, I had a sexual trauma and I know I prefer sex a certain way. My spouse doesn't seem to like making me feel sexy. I'm not sure what to do. Please help.
Yeah, good question. This is an example of a category of difficulties that couples have in their sex life that are very, very common. And it's we can't talk through and resolve conflict as it pertains to our sexual relationship, right? Which sometimes is evidence of a larger communication difficulty that we have in our relationship. I would want to, when I have a couple come in and this is the kind of presenting issue or difficulty that they're seeking out help for, one of the questions that I have is, how does conflict resolution go in other areas of a relationship? Are we able to kind of navigate things that we see differently, that we experience differently, and find a resolution to those things that feels good to both of us, that doesn't leave either of us feeling like a loser? Or do we routinely have in different areas of our life and relationship situations where we can't talk through things, we avoid talking through them, or when we do, it blows up and it gets ugly and there's not mutual respect, or we don't know how to arrive at win-win and the solutions that feel good to us both and don't leave either of us feeling like a loser. Because if we can't do it in other areas of our relationship, we're not going to be able to do it in our sex life.
Mm.
Sexual issues are very vulnerable, they're emotionally charged, it can be really difficult to talk through, even if we can talk through other things well. And so if we can't talk through other things well, we really don't have a whole lot of chance that we're going to be able to talk through sexual disagreements or disconnects for well. So I would want to know, how does just communication and conflict resolution work for you, period, in other areas of your relationship? And if there is a struggle there, start there. And is being able to talk through and work through conflict in other areas of your life and relationship are going to give you the skills and the emotional intimacy and connectedness to better be able to talk through the conflicts and difficulties that are in the sexual part of your relationship. If you are able to talk through those things in other areas of your relationship, and it's specifically just the sexual part of your relationship that you're running into difficulty, then you need to bring in somebody that can help you figure out what's getting in the way here, right? That if you've tried everything that you knew to do and it doesn't work, then you're going to need a different approach. And a therapist is going to be able to sit with you, identify the cycle that's breaking down between the two of you, and help you figure out how to come at it in a way that will enable you to have the situation be different. And in this specific question, she says there's trauma that's a part of her story, and it's unclear how much that plays into the difficulty that they're having with each other. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's something that's been worked through and is a minor, relatively small part of the conflict between them. Could be a really big part. Could be really playing into why they can't land on something that feels good. Not really going to be able to know without a therapist being able to ask the right questions and assess, what the barriers are, what the blocks are that are getting in the way.
Yeah, you and Tish tackled some of this in the recent episode of My Counselor Live, where y'all just talked about how big of a role trauma can play in the sexual experience for whichever spouse has had that, or if both spouses have had that, and just the importance of talking about it, addressing it, communicating, that
Yeah.
spouse relationship, that marriage relationship, should and hopefully is a safe place to talk about those things. And
if there's a dragon in the room, if there's trauma in the room, we got to be able to be united in fighting that dragon together. Mm. That if we don't name it, if we don't understand it, and we don't know how to join together in fighting it, we're going to lose to it every time. Mm. And so it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Josh, just for answering that question. I hope that it made whoever asked this question, gave you some clarity on, continuing that conversation and hopefully finding that that healthy, God-designed sexual relationship with your spouse. Yeah. All right. Well, just kind of to close it off, I want to tackle this last question. And Josh, I think I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about this. I know that you have worked in ministry and in pastoral positions. And so I'd love to hear your insight on this. This person said, what does the Bible say about asexuality? Mm-hmm. They say that it's real. There's nothing wrong with us. And they want to know what the Bible says about it.
Yeah, I probably want to define asexuality a little bit, because at one level I would say that no one is asexual, and that we all are a male or female, and that even if you experience gender dysphoria, you have male anatomy or female anatomy, you have a male experience or a female experience of life, and that's part of gender, and that's part of our gender sexuality. And that's part of a core fundamental aspect of who we are. So no one is truly asexual in nature. We're all sexual creatures by design. But what I'm guessing, what's probably being referenced here, is an absence of a sexual desire for erotic kind of sexual connection. You know, a feeling of I have zero interest in connecting sexually, kind of with a partner or the opposite sex. That's just not an interest that I have. It's not something that I think about. It's not something that I feel a desire for. You know, my guess is that's probably kind of the asexual that is being asked about within the question. And totally legitimate, totally fine. There's obviously nothing wrong with that, though sometimes it can be stigmatized in the church. You know, that folks, if they're not married or aren't interested in being married, you know, that there seems to be, you know, something wrong with the individual. But the scriptures talk about eunuchs, and the scriptures talk about those that don't have a desire to be married, and even talk about it in terms of a gift. You know, that to those whom it's given for them to not be married and to devote themselves to the kingdom work that God has created for them is a totally valid and legitimate experience to have. So definitely want to affirm that and communicate the validity of that, and even the kind of references in scripture to that, and where, you know, that God has a place in his kingdom for individuals, that's their experience of life. And I would want to get curious about that also, because the experience of asexuality is sometimes the product of other experiences that we've had in life. Sometimes it's, you know, something biological and just part of our experience across the course of our whole life, and is independent of kind of the nurture or experiential component of our life. Sometimes it's a result of messages that we've internalized growing up around sexuality. Sometimes it's a byproduct of trauma experiences that we've had around sexuality. Sometimes it's around a kind of negative or demonizing of sexuality, shaming around sexuality that we have heard and experienced, that then put us at war with our sexual experience in a way that causes us to really work hard to psychologically disconnect from our sexual experience in order to be pure, in order to be honoring to God. And we've just gotten really good at dissociating and disconnecting from our sexual experience. So it's not that it's not there, but we're effective at disconnecting from it. And so it effectively feels like it's not there, even though it's still part of our experience. And so I would want to get curious about that and just kind of understand what it's about for you in your experience, and what you want to do with that. Right? That one of the things that we talk about within counseling is, you know, not pathologizing things that aren't a problem for individuals, right? And so, yeah, I would want to go. I'm curious about the cause for the question. Where's the pain that kind of prompts the question? You know, where's the pain or friction point? Is it relationally from what others are saying to you, or judgment, and you're kind of wanting, how do I talk through my experience with others? Or is it around some internal conflict that you have around your own experience? You know, what motivates the question? And I would want to get curious about that. And so those are kind of the initial thoughts that come to my mind as a counselor when looking at that question.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Josh, just for answering that one. You know, I feel like that's a concept that I don't know a ton about, and that I don't have a lot of experience in. And so I think even just looking at it from that point of view of someone who doesn't really understand it, it's interesting to kind of hear your take on it. So I appreciate that. So Josh, I have just loved the last like hour and a half of getting to chat with you. You know, of course, we have changed the format just a little bit with My Counselor Live, but still just as impactful. Honestly, I think even more impactful, just getting to tackle different subjects and different things together. And guys, if you are tuning in live or if you're watching the replay, we're so happy you're here. And we love answering your questions. If you think of some right now or during the week, feel free to inbox them, ask them at MyCounselor.Online/ask to be just featured in a future My Counselor Live episode. And yeah, we're going to take this format and run with it. You know, we'd love your
I'm
feedback.
excited. It's going to be really fun.
No, it is. We'd love your feedback, viewers, you know, as you're watching, kind of your thoughts on it.
Definitely.
But, you know, in the next few weeks, I'm going to be meeting with multiple different counselors and getting so many different ideas and thoughts. And I'm really excited for it. So, guys, if you think of questions, please send them in. Give us your feedback. But, Josh, I just appreciate you, and I appreciate you kind of giving your time to this and sharing your wisdom with us.
Likewise, Tori. It's great to sit with you. Appreciate you back and forth, and appreciate your just willingness to engage and share your own experience. I think that's really helpful and beneficial alongside what us as a counselor have to say, as for your just willingness to share your own experience. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, guys, we will see you next week at My Counselor Live here on Facebook, and we will talk with you later, guys. See ya.